The weekly Industry Angel podcast hears from business leaders and entrepreneurs who share their stories and that all-important light bulb moment. This can inspire us all and maybe scratch that itch and kickstart that idea that keeps you awake at night. Welcome to episode 38 of the Industry Angel and the first episode of 2017. I wish you and your family health and happiness. I hope you had an amazing Christmas break. Thank you so much for all the well wishes. And the amount of people who've said they have a really good feeling about this year is unreal. I do too, and it's been pretty crazy already actually. I loved your feedback on the Christmas episode. I'm glad you found it motivating, and it was great to hear some of you took action already. The buzz around this last 2 weeks actually, it's been crazy. I've been involved, and my company Far North's been involved in some amazing projects already. And what is it now? I record this on the 12th of January. So I'm looking forward to sharing the news with you when the time's right. It's all a bit secret squirrel right now, but we've got some good stuff happening. I thought we'd start the year with today's guest that might help us stay positive and work towards a great mindset. Today we have best-selling author, entrepreneur, speaker on performance development, and a trusted advisor to businesses and athletes around the world, Rasmus Ankerson. Welcome to the Industry Angel, Rasmus.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be with you today.
Excellent stuff. Well, Rasmus, if you don't mind, I'm going to elaborate a little bit on that intro because I don't want to miss anything out. You're going to be a modest guy, and I want everything on the table, okay?
Yeah, sure.
So you're the chairman of a Danish football club. You're a director of Brentford FC here in England. And over the past few years, you've been hired to share research on high-performance cultures by global brands, including Lego, Google, IKEA, Facebook, Hitachi, and many more. So your CV, Rasmus, looks like someone in the autumn of their career. How have you squeezed all of this in?
Well, I'm kind of, I'm not a guy that has a career plan and say I'm gonna get this job because when I get this job, then I need to have that job. I just try and follow my curiosity really and my passion and I've been probably pretty productive, but I really enjoy what I do. So I guess that's the reason.
Well, in terms of productivity and passion, I think it's been around the football world or soccer for our US listeners. You started back as a boy. You were a footballer as a boy, yeah?
I'm one of those frustrated, injured ex-players with unreleased ambitions that's become a coach and then works now backstage in a football club. I mean, I played, but I got injured, and then eventually I became a coach. And I actually left the world of football because I wanted to get some experience in the business world. I was an entrepreneur, built some companies, and then by coincidence really, I met a guy called Matthew Benham who's a gambler, very professional gambler, made a fortune on gambling, and he owned Brentford, and I met him and we started hanging out, and one day he said to me he wanted to buy another club. And I said, why don't you have a look at my childhood club in Denmark, which was FC Midtjylland. And we wanted to do a lot of things different in football, Matthew and myself. And Midtjylland was almost bankrupt at the time. And I guess when you're bankrupt, you're open for change. So we eventually he ended up buying that club and made me the chairman. And so we've been running those two clubs for the past couple of years, which is great fun.
I mean, it's great, Rasmus, because you've been an ex-player. I mean, you've took a UEFA badge as well. You're UEFA A, I think, aren't you?
Yeah, I did. I mean, when I was 19, 20, 22 years old, I really thought I wanted to be a coach, and I was a coach as well at the time. But I also felt already at that time that there was a lot of lessons to be learned from outside the football world, which from the business world, which I could take back into football one day. And I never knew how I was going to get back into football, but obviously I'm back now and enjoying it. But I'm a big believer that we learn the most when we hear about stories and examples from people outside our comfort zone or outside our industry. And that's also what I've been trying to do with my books. I look into arts, I look into sports, I look into business, but I always try and describe my case stories in a way where people can relate to it, no matter which industry they're working in.
I think that's a great benefit to the two clubs, because obviously you're a football man, you've been there, you've done it, and you're into business. I mean, just thinking of an example we had at Sunderland, which is my club. We play in red and white like you guys.
Yeah.
Actually, you're gonna be playing Newcastle, our rivals, on Saturday, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll win that for you guys.
Thank you. Right, it's at Griffin Park, isn't it?
Is it? Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Make sure you do them.
Yeah.
But in Sunderland we had Niall Quinn, who was obviously a player, but Niall was a real businessman. He was the chairman of the club, but because he'd been a player, he got both ends of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you come from the outside, you've seen how things work in different industries, but also I think sometimes if you get too single-minded if you've just been in one world where you grew up and you developed and then you stay there. And I mean, football is an industry that's kind of dominated by people who've been in the game for their whole life. They've been players, they've been coaches, they become coaches, maybe they became agents, and I think it's really healthy for the industry that you have people from the outside coming in, and that's what you're seeing now. You also see investment groups from the US, for example, buying these football clubs. And this is not just random football guys. This is like Goldman Sachs guys. It's really professional investors, and the mindset they bring into football, I think, is something that will help develop the industry.
Do you think there's money in football, though, Rasmus? You know, when some of these entrepreneurs buy the clubs. I mean, let's talk about Newcastle there, Mike Ashley, you know, and we've got Ellis Short, who's a Texan oil man. You know, they kind of end up wanting to sell the clubs because they're losing money on them.
We have a saying in the clubs that I'm involved in. We say, if you want to become a millionaire, here's how you do it. You start out as a billionaire, and then you buy a football club, and then you become a millionaire. And I mean, obviously, no one, I think, who owns a football club today have made their fortune by owning a football club. They made their fortune elsewhere, and then they buy a football club and they spend their money. But and I mean, the fundamental problem in football is that your biggest revenue streams are variable. They depend on results, and your biggest costs are fixed. And that puts a lot of risk into the business model. And it basically means that unless you have a TV deal that's as big as the one that's in Premier League today, then most clubs in the world, they have to run the club with an operational loss every year, and then they have to make up for that by making a profit on selling players, or maybe qualifying for Europa League or Champions League. So it is a risky business model, the way it's structured. But I also feel like that a football club has a lot more, has other purposes than making money. I mean, the football club serves a really important role in a community. As you know, it brings pride to people. You know, it brings passion to people. It brings togetherness. So you know, there was an American management guru that once said that money or profit is for a company what oxygen is for a human body. I mean, you need oxygen to live, but you don't live to breathe. You live to do other things. You live to make a difference. And it's the same thing with profit in a football club. I think it's important, but it's not the only thing that matters for a football club.
Yeah, I think some of them could be a bit of a passion project as well, maybe, or you've had some affiliation with it being your boyhood club, or
yeah. There's a lot. I think there's a lot of owners that, like the Brentford owner, for example, Matthew Benham. He was a Brentford supporter. He's been since 1979, when he was a young boy traveling to away games. And when you speak to him, there's a lot more than an investment to him. I mean, he sees the upside financially of Brentford, maybe one day promoting to the Premier League. But there's also other reasons for why he owns the club, and one of them is giving something back, I think.
Definitely, yeah. We've had something similar with my hometown, South Shields. Yeah. It's been bought by a local businessman, and you can see the aspirations in terms of going up the leagues, and a bit like what's happened to Brentford. You know, you guys are on the up now, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of established ourselves now in the championship. After well, I mean, in the last 50 years, Brentford has spent most of its time in the lower leagues. So it's quite a unique story that Brentford are now like third season in the championship, and we're pushing to see if we can get into that top six or maybe even the top two. It's probably not going to happen this season, but we think there's maybe a good chance in the next couple of seasons. But we're a small club. I mean, we don't even have close to the budgets that some of our rivals have. So the mantra in Brentford is that we're not going to win by outspending the competition. We're going to outthink them. So we really try and drive innovation and create an environment or a culture of innovation in the club. And that's why I think it's fun to be part of, because it's fun to be the underdog. It's fun to try and see if you can wipe out some of the inefficiencies in football and do things different. And that's very much the DNA of Brentford.
That's a great segue, Rasmus, into where I want to take this now. You said outthink. So if you're going to outthink Newcastle on Saturday, is this something you've brought to the club? You know, I know you're all over this. You've done a lot of research, and obviously you've got your recent book out. Is this research something you've brought into Brentford?
Yeah, I mean the previous book I wrote, The Goldmine Effect. I mean, it was actually the reason why I met Matthew Benham, in the owner of Brentford and now Midtjylland in the first place, because he read the book and he enjoyed it, and we kind of agreed that a lot of I studied high performance talent environments, small places in the world that produce a disproportionate amount of top talent in that book. So, for example, why do the best middle distance runners in the world come from the same village in Ethiopia? Why do the best sprinters come from the same athletic cup in Kingston in Jamaica? And we felt that there was a lot that football could learn from some of these other sports, especially individual sports, because when an individual athlete optimizes himself in terms of diet, in terms of sleep, in terms of training, in terms of every choice that he makes, not only when he's in doing his activity, but also like basically 24/7. We felt that football players could learn a lot from that, because we didn't feel that football players were living like that. So we came up with this concept called 24/7 professionals, which means that what your success on the pitch depends a lot on not the choices you make when you're on the pitch, but when you're not on the pitch. So that's something we tried and introduce. We hired sleep coaches. We use sleep technology to because there's a massive upside if you can, if in terms of performance, if players can sleep better and more effectively. So we try and one of the principles here is that we try and learn from other industries, from other fields, from other sports than ourselves, and then if we think there is something. If there's an edge to be found, then we try and dig into that and implement it.
24/7 professional things, it's really interesting. I think that's massive now, isn't it? And especially in soccer, for instance, because you hear about a lot of the players getting paid so much, and it kind of goes to the head because the young guys, they're going to be driving fast cars and nice clothes, and is that something you kind of try to instill in Brentford that maybe other clubs don't? Is that something you put a real emphasis on?
Yeah, because we think that that's where football has a long way to go. It's not why I sometimes ask people, like, if you see football today and you see football 10 years ago, 15 years ago maybe, you see the game today is a lot faster. Players are physically stronger, faster, more endurant than they were 10 or 15 years ago. And then I say, do you think that development is going to continue? That the same improvement we've seen the last 15 years, we will see the next 15 years? And people always say, well, no, we reached the peak. There's we'll only have marginal gains from now on. There's not going to be like massive gains to be had on the physical side. And I'm just felt, well, I think that's human nature to say that. I think that the same development is going to take place at least in the next 15 years. And then my question is, how can we speed that up? How can we make that happen in 5 years, in 7 years, rather than 15 years? What does that mean for what we have to do today? And I think when you do that exercise, you come up with some So really interesting ideas for what you can actually do and how you can be different, and especially on that 24/7 professional side, we think there's some big gains to be had if you implement that properly and you get players to really live like true 24/7 professionals.
Thinking about that, obviously sleep, nutrition, that's all good. But is there anything else we can take from other sports? Sprinting, for instance. Some of these players now that they're actual like sprinters. That they could actually have been a sprinter. Or do you take influence from NFL or baseball or any other sports?
Yeah, I mean, one thing we've looked a lot into is NFL in terms of their set pieces, set plays. In football, I mean, 35% of all goals are scored from set pieces, corners, free kicks, throw-ins. But most teams, they spend maximum 10 minutes training set pieces per week. Rationally, logically, that doesn't make sense. So it's been a big emphasis for us to really try and build a culture around training set pieces. And we went to NFL to get some inspiration in terms of how they work with these stop-start situations, which they have a lot of in American football. So there is definitely something to be learned, and we had an American football coach coming in recently to speak to us about, and some of the players about how to do that, and what we had a good discussion about what we can take from that. So there's definitely a lot to be learned if you break other sports down and see what elements there are relevant to football, and what can you take from that.
Do you literally have a playbook then?
Yeah, well, it's something we talk about. We talk a lot about how we build a playbook. I would say more like a system or a language for it, because every season an American football player is going to learn 300 different plays. Why can a football player or soccer player not learn 10 plays? So but that's not. It's not culture in soccer. And there's a lot of barriers you have to break down. One of them being, well, it's kind of okay for a really bad football team to be good on set pieces. That's acceptable to people. We can't accept that Rotherham in the championship scores a lot of goals on set pieces because they don't have the best players, they don't play the best footballs. That's okay. But we kind of struggle to accept that a good team can become outstanding by using set pieces, because it's not, people don't value a set piece goal as much as they value a goal based on beautiful possession play. But there are some of those mindset things that you got to break down. So we really try and say, well, actually, it's not, a weak team can become average by being good on set pieces, but why can't a good team not become outstanding because of set pieces? That's kind of the question we try and then follow up with some actions and strategies. So yeah.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how you get there as long as you win.
Yeah, you always gotta start with the end goal in mind, and the end goal is winning as many football games as possible, and then you need to try and break down what's the basics of winning, what's the basics of the game, and then you kind of try and build your style of play from that point.
Exactly. I mean, you've seen some clubs who, let's have a think. Stoke, for instance, they were always a really kind of bullying, tall, big side, and that was their game plan. So, I guess as a football club, do you buy players who can hold possession? Do you buy players who are going to lump it up? We had Rory Delap at Sunderland, and then he went to Stoke and he was doing these major long throw-ins and scoring. We never knew he could do that.
Yeah, and sometimes you find out by accident, right? That oh, right, this guy is actually I think he was a javelin thrower, wasn't he?
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
I think he was that in his youth. So that's one of the reasons why he's there. But long throws are very. Midtjylland, the soccer club, scored 9 goals on long throws last season. And what is it going to cost you to get a striker that can give you 9 goals? It's going to be very expensive. But if you can get that for free by having someone who can take a long throw and into the box and capitalize on that, then that's worth a lot.
You mentioned javelin there, so obviously I know you've done a lot of research, and I think you've worked with some big brands, so you're taking this sport and research, and are you pushing that into business, Rasmus?
Yeah, I'm really interested in the takeaways from sports that can work in business and also the other way. And that's what I try to do in my new book, Hunger and Paradise, where I'm kind of trying to look into, what actually makes a successful organization fail. Why does it become complacent? And also how do you kind of fight against that? How do you stay ahead of the pack when you're successful? And I think that's I look at it kind of from a psychological point of view. So I'm not so interested in if it's other reasons. I'm kind of looking at why does successful organizations fail? What are the psychological factors that drives them to fail? And I think there's a lot of similarities, because after all, it's human beings running an organization, whether that be a company or a football club, and there's a lot we can learn from each other in that respect.
Does it just basically come down to talent acquisition?
No, I mean the kind of key thing, key thing in my book is that when you become successful, you don't just fight your competitors anymore. You start to fight yourself. You start to fight human nature, and a lot of the things you have to do to stay hungry, to stay successful, not only become successful, seems counterintuitive to many people. So I talk a lot about that. You want to have a culture where you treat success with the same skepticism as failure, and that doesn't come natural to people. It comes natural to dig for reasons for why we failed if things didn't work out, but digging for reasons for why we may be successful doesn't come natural to people. We just tend to cruise on, expecting things to continue, and that's really dangerous for an organization, because it's complex. Success is a complex thing. I mean, I sometimes ask people in business, I mean, are you successful because of good leadership? Or are you successful because of good market conditions? And not all can answer that question, but you need to know that. Were you lucky, or were you actually skillful? Because if you think you are, I mean, we have a saying here. We said success turns luck into genius. I mean, there's no one who wants to admit that they were successful because they were lucky if they thought they were skillful. But what characterizes a really resilient organization is that it has a culture where people are allowed to question success with the same skepticism as they question failure. And I think that's a key takeaway, whether you talk sports, arts, or business, politics even.
So whenever we come across failure in a project, we have a bit of a post-mortem, and we'll sit down, we'll look at lessons learned, and we'll try and understand why, what, how. Are you suggesting we should do that more for success?
Yeah, I think you got to study success. Well, one reason to learn from success. I mean, what I think, if you look at top athletes, what I find really tend to characterize the ones that crack the code is that they really understand in detail who they are when they are at their best, their top performance pattern, such to say. What characterizes me when I am at my peak? So that's a reason for studying success, trying to study success stories, is what's common in the success story, and try and be more conscious about what do I have to do to be the best version of myself. But it's also important, as I said, to question success with skepticism sometimes, to say, well, actually, why were we successful in this company? Were we successful because of the oil price? Were we successful because of certain market conditions? Were we successful because our competitors were really not that good? Or were we successful because we were just outstanding and we were competing, we were just trashing our competitors because we did this and that? That understanding of not only effect, but also the causes that drive effect is really, really, really key. And that can, it's easier said than done, because in a company there seems to be, quite a bit of a time delay between cause and effect. So if you are successful as a company today, it's not what you did yesterday, it's probably what you did 5 years ago. Even if you're a failure in 5 years' time, it's what you do today, it's not what you do in 5 years' time. And that's kind of one of my other lessons, that it means that, once you realize that, then it actually means that you can actually have good superficial financial numbers, but actually have a problem because there's this time delay, which also means that one of the keys to keep a company successful is to be willing to drive change before it becomes obvious that there's a need to change. And that is, for the human mind, really difficult to do, and it's really difficult to change a company from a position of strength because everyone looks at you and say, why will you fix something? It's obviously not broken.
Totally understand. Yeah, I mean, I speak a lot about this in terms of business models, how they can expire quite quickly, and you've got to keep reevaluating. Obviously, you've got forces, business trends. If you do, even a marketing pest analysis, you've got lots of factors that can affect your business. So you've got to keep looking to the future. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a great some great research done on the relationship between development in human lifespan versus corporate lifespan. And the interesting thing is that if you look at that over the past 50 years, humans live longer and longer, but companies live shorter and shorter. There's the lifespan of a company has gone dramatically down, and there's nothing that suggests that is not going to continue, because when digitization hits more industries, they're going to get much more fast-paced. Technology is playing a role in many industries, so it means that you got to reinvent your company much more often than you used to do, and that takes a certain mindset, and that's actually, that's something that business leaders have to think about. That business model comes and goes.
You're so right. We don't want that Kodak moment.
No. I mean the Kodaks and the Nokias. I mean, those are all examples of what can happen when if you allow yourself to assume that tomorrow will be like today, and that's very tempting in a successful company, because people who are successful, they struggle to imagine a reality where they are no longer successful. And I guess again that's human nature. I mean, it's a bit like economists talk about. That in family-owned companies, it's often the third generation that fucks the whole thing up, because the kind of the first generation made it happen. They know what sacrifices it took.
Sure.
The second generation, they seen what sacrifices it took, and they kind of respect that we've not always been successful. But the third generation, they're born into it, so they've seen, well, this is just going to continue automatically, and that is often what happens in a company. I mean, it kind of, at one point when it has been successful for several years, it loses its collective memory about the times when it was tough, and then it kind of gets a sense of entitlement, which is the worst thing that can happen to a successful company.
Thinking about the correlation, Rasmus, with business and performance sports, I mean, we can look at all the different aspects of success, but one thing I'm interested in is confidence. So no doubt when you've spoke to a few of these global brands or some of these teams or players or individuals, confidence must play a massive part in that. Do you do some sort of psychology work, some psychometric testing? How has that affected your research?
Well, I'm not. My research it's quite. I used to call myself the high performance anthropologist, because my approach was, when I did the goldmine effect, was not doing desk research and stuff like that, but actually going to these environments and train with people there, live with people there, and try and in that way trying to pick up some of the lessons. And I've very much done that with Hunger in Paradise too. It's going to the environments, spending time in the environments, and trying to understand what are the keys here, what are the lessons, what are the things you are not going to do. So that's been kind of my approach to my books.
So some of those, let's think about an Ethiopian runner. Do they face confidence issues that a UK English footballer might?
Yeah, I think that's human nature. I mean, people always look more confident on the outside than on the inside. It's confidence is a big thing, and I think if you mentioned Ethiopia, yourself, as I know I spent quite a bit of time there, I also spent quite a bit of time in Kenya. And one of the key things for why these guys these communities produce that many top, middle, long distance runners is that every single day you're around someone that's made it. And that makes you think that you can make it as well one day. I mean, if I go on when I stayed in Iten in Kenya, this little place that produced the best marathon runners in the world, when I stayed there and I went for a jog, 30 minutes in the morning, I saw 3 world champions in 30 minutes. And if you run 10 strides behind the guy that won the world championship last year, there's a good chance you think you can do that as well. Because that breeds confidence, it breeds belief. And that is one of the unique things about these environments, that the world-class performers are really close to the youngsters. And that creates that feeling of confidence, and we can do it. Which is something, which is one of my big things in football, that if you go to some of the big clubs, there's very, very little connection between the academy players and the first team players. There's almost like a wall built in between them. They don't see each other. They don't learn from each other, and that's a shame, because I think that's what really creates a top talent environment. That people can see that pathway, and they are around those guys, so they end up feeling, well, this guy is just like me, and if he can do it, why can't I?
That's a kind of mentorship approach, isn't it? So thinking about what people say about, you're the average of the 5 people you hang with, should we as business leaders and entrepreneurs and whoever in a business, should you try and ensure that you're around people like that to learn from them?
I think so, yeah. I think so. If you want to do something, go and find someone who's done it. And that kind of happened naturally in some of these environments that I researched when I wrote The Goldmine Effect. You have these world-class performers around the youngsters, and it's a very unique environment that creates, and I think something that serves as a real explanation for why some of these places keep producing one world-class performer after another.
Excellent stuff. Rasmus, I'm just checking the clock here, and we're going to have to wrap things up. Is there anything that you want to leave us with? I mean, we'll need to know where we can grab your book and where we can find you. Would you mind letting us know?
Well, it's very easy. I mean, it's a small book. It's quick to read, and it's designed that way because I don't like big, long business books on 300 pages, because I think very few people actually read them. So I wrote a business book that you were supposed to read on a 2 hours flight. It's designed that way. It's written that way, and I hope people will find it entertaining. It's available on Amazon, so it's just a few clicks away. So. Hopefully, people will enjoy it.
What I'll do, I'll just put some links in our show notes, Rasmus, and people can find your book. It's interesting what you say there about the way you've designed it. I can't remember the stat, but it's a crazy amount of books that never get read after they've been bought.
Yeah, a lot of business books end up on the shelf, and they stay on the shelf. So I think as business authors, I think we need to think a lot about that. We need to think about. We are approaching people that have very short attention span, and how can we communicate to them in a way that they will actually have an impact? Because at the end of the day, a book is not written to be on the shelf. It's written to be read.
Excellent, love that. Well, Rasmus, listen, thanks very much. It's been great to speak to you, and best of luck for Saturday.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be on your show.
That was Rasmus Ankerson. I hope you found that interesting. I really enjoyed that. Was I being a bit selfish because it was all about football? But there's takeaways there. Rasmus, he's been on quite a journey, researching the habits and lifestyles of elite athletes and star performers. It certainly points to environment, practice, and your peers and mentorship. So sometimes that doesn't necessarily have to be a formal mentorship. Quite often it's there, and we don't even realise it, until months or even years later. Learning by stealth, maybe. So if you can try and surround yourself with positive people, secure yourself a mentor, it's only going to be good stuff. As always, send me your feedback on this episode. I'm expecting a few Newcastle supporters to give me some grief. So until next time, I'm Ian Farrer. This is the Industry Angel, and thanks for listening.